Welcome to the Listen for Life podcast with Genevieve Richardson. Genevieve is a speech-language pathologist rehabilitating adults with communication challenges after a stroke or due to a neurological impairment. Get equipped with knowledge from experts in the field and professionals you need to know. We'll hear stories and experiences from others who are navigating life with aphasia. So, put your earphones in and take a walk outside. This isn't just a podcast. This is a community, a resource, and a support system. We're in this together. Do life.
Welcome to the Listen for Life Aphasia podcast. Today we are talking about the complexities of communication. We are zeroing in on a fundamental aspect of our humanity, the power of connection through communication. Imagine a world where your voice is so soft, where your words come out as a whisper that people you talk to can't understand you. That is just one small example of what it could be like for those living with Parkinson's disease. When communication becomes a challenge, listeners often have to ask the person with Parkinson's to repeat themselves. And often it doesn't make a difference unless the person has learned how to hear themselves and project their voice and to speak loud or with intent. Today's episode, we're going to meet Caitlin Fattori. She is a speech pathologist in Cincinnati, Ohio, and she is the co-founder of voicesforparkinsons.org. She runs a nonprofit in Cincinnati where she is bridging the gap. Folks that have not sought speech therapy services before, or they can't afford them, or their insurance has run out. And she runs maintenance groups to keep people working and talking in tip-top shape. And with that, it builds community. So I hope you'll stay tuned, listen to what Caitlin has to say as we talk about Parkinson's today, because whether you have aphasia or Parkinson's, it is about communication, and a speech pathologist who is trained in these areas of communication with adults can be that person to help you bridge the gap and maintain your communication. Let's hear Caitlin. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Listen for Life Aphasia podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So, folks, this is going to be either the first or second episode where we talk about Parkinson's. As you all know, aphasia tends to be, the topic I speak on most, but Parkinson's is also a communication disorder.
Yes.
There's a lot of overlap about what we do for strategies, what we do for training and education. So it is very much in alignment with aphasia treatment.
Absolutely.
Enough about that, Caitlin. Let's hear about you. So Caitlin, tell us about you, where you are at, and what your business is.
Okay. Thanks again for having me. I'm really excited. So, I'm Caitlin. I am the co founder and president of Voices for Parkinson's in Cincinnati, Ohio. I work in a variety of settings. The nonprofit is kind of my little baby, my side gig, but specialize in Parkinson's. We offer a speak out program, work on communication, and I, in general, just am a nerd about everything speech pathology. I love what I do. And outside of work, I like to be outside. I have a dog, and I've been practicing for about 8 years. So I specialize in Parkinson's in probably the last 5 years.
Okay. So what made you be interested in Parkinson's to begin with?
That's a great question. Everyone asks me, do you have a family member? How did you get involved in this? And it was really a natural kind of progression after school. I didn't learn a lot about Parkinson's. I actually learned in school, don't do swallowing exercises, don't really treat them because you're going to fatigue the muscles and we're going to make them worse. So coming out of school, I thought, okay, this isn't really a population that I'll see. I was working for an outpatient clinic and had the opportunity to get trained in Speak Out and learned about it. And I thought, wow, this is the total opposite of what I've learned. I really like what they're teaching and the research behind it. So it kind of fizzled into, all right, let's try this, let's get trained in it. Hey, we have this great population actually in the assisted living that you are treating in. Let's start this. Let's see where it goes. And so then we actually, through this outpatient, had the first Loud Crowd in Ohio. It's not called Loud Crowd anymore, but it's the maintenance part of the group. So what I loved as a speech therapist was learning that there's these individual sessions, and then we typically see people kind of fall off the train, and then 6 months later they come in and, oh, I haven't done any of my homework, life got busy, I forgot about the speech aspect of things. And so this maintenance group was like a light bulb and really caught my interest as a speech therapist and my passion for helping people. It's very cliche, but that's why we're in this business. And I thought, wow, how cool. I really liked the model that Parkinson's Voice Project down in Texas had, working for a big company and insurance and things like that. How do we break down some of those barriers and give the best treatment available? So, and then as I got into it, I just loved the people I met. The population's phenomenal. There's such a need for it. And just kind of being a resource really kind of lit my fire. And, being specialized in it and learning more and kind of finding my niche instead of being good, okay at a lot of things. I really found, okay, I'm going to hone in on this and I really enjoy it. And I'm going to be the best I can in this niche. So that's how I got started.
I love that. There's a lot of, you said a lot of things that I want to touch on. The
Okay.
first one would be this maintenance concept, because this is what I remember when I worked in home health. I'd see someone and I was LSVT loud
Hmm.
certified for, gosh, a long time, 25 years.
Oh, wow.
I've been certified in that, but I used to do that treatment in home health for my folks. And I would talk to them about, 6 months from now, talk to your doctor, and let's do a tune up. We wouldn't do the full thing, the full 16 visits again. But the point I want to make with this is Parkinson's is progressive, and
Right.
we have to stay on top of it. And
Hmm.
um, what I remember is meeting some clients that had had the diagnosis for years, and their speech had just very gradually declined, and they had no awareness of it.
Yes.
Where they might have had grandkids and they thought their grandkids were the ones that had the speech deficit or the hearing deficit. It
Yes.
can't be
Yes.
me, it can't be my
Right.
speech. It must be my
She can't hear me.
5-year-old that can't hear, right? So it's just so important, number 1, to get on the speech early,
Hmm.
get good habits established, and start that calibration process.
Yes. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that calibration process? How do we get the person with Parkinson's to hear themselves?
Yeah, that's such a good question, too. So, you brought up a great point. First of all, when I was trained, I thought, okay, if someone doesn't have a problem, I'll see them once, we'll do an evaluation and kind of go from there. But now I'm on that board of, okay, let's do it early, like you said. It's a lot easier. I use this kind of often, but it's a lot easier to lose 5 pounds than it is 15 pounds. So if we can step and nip it in the bud in the beginning when some of that cognition is still really good, physical hasn't, progressed as much, if we can get you at your best and calibrate you into that, then that's a great model. So the calibration piece, and that's what I love about this program, is I've had clients who come in and say, I don't think I have a problem. My wife says so, but she can't hear, or vice versa. My partner, my kids, whatever. And so it's okay. Well, I'll acknowledge that. Let's just do some data. And so the way we can really get them to understand that their biofeedback is impaired One is I liken it to physical. You can see when your steps are small, and I say, does your physical therapist or your, trainer ever say bigger steps? And you're like, I am taking big steps. I liken that to, okay, well, that's your voice. Your voice is saying, your brain is saying your voice is loud enough, but in actuality, it's those little stutter steps. It's quieter. So I take some baseline data and then explain, okay, well, here are where your numbers are. And they're like, well, that can't be true. Like that's not that low. Okay, well, why don't we listen? And so I will provide a recording if they're okay with it, and I play it back, and I also put my voice or maybe their partner's voice in it, and I say, okay, do you feel like I'm too loud? No. Okay, so compare your voice to my voice, and I'd say 100% of the people say, I had no idea that's how I sounded. And they'll say, well, is your phone turned down? I say, but listen to my voice compared to yours. So if mine is sounding okay, it's not a volume or a technology issue. And I had one gentleman who says, oh, my poor wife. She's right. Yeah. He says, I can't believe I've been putting her through this. And so it's that audio recording, those video recordings, listening to themselves, because nobody wants to be loud. They want to be heard. So the
Oh,
calibration, yes,
love that. Say it again.
yes, yes. So nobody wants to be loud. They want to be heard.
Amen.
So if they feel that they're being too loud, they're never going to use that voice. So if they walk out of that door and they're not feeling comfortable, they're never going to have the correct volume. And so I tell them sometimes my job is to make you comfortable with being uncomfortable. So if you don't feel that little inkling of, oh, I'm too loud, then you're probably in that low volume. And so it's a lot of feedback and cueing of what is too loud, what is too soft, what is right. What does your body feel? What is your brain telling you when your numbers are within the normal conversation limits? When I'm telling you I can hear you really well, what is that feeling? And that's what you should be feeling. So listening to your body versus listening to that brain telling you too loud, too slow, all those things.
It is complex
Oh,
because the person with Parkinson's has to do this not only for their speech, they have to
mhm.
do it for their walking. They have to do it for every single movement
Right,
of their
right.
body.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why
Yep,
it is so important to get ahead of this. Early,
absolutely.
someone gets a diagnosis and, take a little time to process that, but jump in. And part of, I think, that processing, that coping is getting in with professionals early on that
Right,
can help with some counseling
right,
because
right.
there's a big identity shift. It's
Absolutely.
something I focus a lot on with my aphasia clients. We have to deal with it. We have
Yes,
to deal with the grief. We have to deal with all of that other stuff that interferes or can be a barrier to learning what they need to learn to
right.
maximize their life.
Right. And that education, like you said, of this is a shift. It's a shift for you. It's a shift for your communication partners, for your life partners, for your kids. It's not just a one and done kind of, well, all right, I have this. It's so involved, like you said. Yeah.
So early people,
Yes.
you get
Yes.
it. And then finding a way. And what I love about Parkinson's Voice Project and Speak Out, those are the same. Everybody's listening probably like, what is that? Okay, so
Yes.
it's Parkinson's Voice Project. That's the business, but they
Mhm.
have a licensure program for speech pathologists called Speak Out. And then they really, really put a lot of emphasis on maintenance and,
Mhm.
you know, support, ongoing support. I love
Yes.
that, and that's just so
Yes.
any I would say, I would argue, any neurologic condition that impacts communication, our folks need that ongoing maintenance, community, know that they're not alone.
Absolutely. And what better way? I think one thing that I just was stuck on getting out of school was I'm within these four walls, but communication happens everywhere else. And so what better way to get someone confident one-on-one and then to carry over those skills into a group setting where they have to topic maintenance, figuring out what they want to say, how they're saying it, keeping up with the conversation, all of those things that are outside of those walls. And so carrying over and generalizing, I love that part of it.
And I think back to my training in school, and when we're early on in our diagnosis and treatment courses, and they're always talking about generalization, but they never really talked about, at least in my, never really dug into, well, what is that? How do
Right.
you get out of the clinic?
Right.
How do you get folks to take what they've learned sitting in front of you in a very sterile, structured environment, and how do you get that out? And it really became so much more obvious to me when I started doing telepractice. I've been in the telepractice space for 10 years now,
Oh,
so
wow.
way pre-COVID. I mean,
Yes.
my mentor, I learned telepractice from my mentor, and he had started it in 2005. So he was definitely a pioneer in trying to
Yes.
reach people across, breaking that geo I wanna say geological, no, it's and then I wanna say
Geographical?
geometric. Yes, geographic, the other geo words. See, folks, it does happen. Word finding is
I
real.
like your strategy. That was good.
Wait, geo what? Yes. So telepractice was a great opportunity
Mhm.
to pull in family members, to really
Yes.
provide education where we didn't used to have that in the clinic. People would physically have to come in. And
Yes.
often, and if we're in like an outpatient setting, unless we're walking down to like the physical therapy gym down the hospital, we're not working on carryover training,
Right.
again, in a sterile environment. So I just love telepractice for that.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about doing Parkinson's treatment. I know you do in person as well
Mhm.
as telepractice. Can you kind of compare and contrast that for us?
Mhm. Absolutely. So I have found that telepractice is just as effective as in person. It does take a tiny bit more work on their part sometimes with the recording aspect. I'll ask them to record themselves and listen because sometimes the technology going from my computer to theirs, they don't hear it as well. But as long as somebody, as speech therapists, we know how to determine if someone's appropriate for it or not, all the good, good cognition, they're able to set it up, they're able to follow the directions. But I have, I love them both. So usually do an in-person evaluation and then follow up with telehealth, but both of them have been very, very effective. I like the telepractice for the reasons you said. It's very convenient for our people who aren't technically homebound, but it's taxing to get out. The wife or the husband has to figure out their own schedule to drive the person. So for this, telepractice, they can kind of help set them up if they need help, and then they can join the session if they need to for a couple minutes, and then they can go do what they need to do. And so the telepractice allows for a better reach of people. So, I'm located in Cincinnati, I'm licensed in Ohio. So if someone in Dayton, an hour away, wants these services, but they don't have anybody in their area, or they, want to come to me, then we can do it virtually. And that's so much better. I can reach such a wider audience. And then people can get the services they need from specialized people, professionals. I also like the telepractice, how they can see themselves. And so I'll say, well, look at that. Look at your mouth moving. Look at that movement you have. And so it allows for that. The one thing I don't do as much with the telepractice just because of the logistics is the decibel reader. So in person, I always have a decibel reader, and I'm able to better say, okay, well, this was 72, this was 74, and show those data numbers. But with telepractice, it still works because I'm still able to have them do the self-awareness and how did you feel that sounded, and okay, that sounded great to me, and how did you feel about that? And so giving that subjective feedback is just as effective. So that's, I love them both. I think they're both very effective, especially for the Speak Out program. Parkinson's Voice Project has a lovely e-library. So all my materials, well, their materials, but what I'm using is in an e-format, so I just log in, click on it, I go to the lesson I need, they can see it, it's big letters, and the program's all there. And then the client can also access that e-library or have a workbook sent to them. So that's really accessible.
I love that. I just think it's an amazing program and such a resource and community
Mhm.
for folks with Parkinson's.
Yeah. And the telepractice has been wonderful for the maintenance group. We do a hybrid approach. One of them is fully virtually, and then the other one is in person or virtual, and we all log in as a group. But that navigating that kind of technology issue of, okay, someone's speaking, oop, we're talking over each other. So I really like that piece, and it allows them to have that choice of, oh, today I'm feeling good physically, I can go into the office and go see them, or I have a doctor's appointment, I'm going to be cutting it close, I can come on virtual. So it's a great mix.
Neat. So let's pivot and talk about your nonprofit.
Yeah. So I co-founded the nonprofit. It's called Voices for Parkinson's. I want to say oh, yep. So 2019 did all the paperwork, got the official nonprofit status Friday that the world shut down for COVID. So kind of in the last few years have really stepped up the game there, and have been seeing clients under that. And the nonprofit model was my dream of how do I take away some of these barriers to care? So I'll try to keep it quick, but I was working for an outpatient clinic. I went in their homes sometimes, and I'd go in and the person would have a copay of like $120. So as a speech therapist, everyone knows they need PT, but speech therapy is kind of more of a, encouragement, education. So you walk in and you say, oh, it's $120. They're like, thanks, but no thanks. Like, I really didn't want to do this anyways. My wife made me, my neurologist made me, my husband made me, my kids made me. And so I'm like, man, there's got to be a better way. And I went to the Lead with Intent symposium down at Parkinson's Voice Project, and they have a lovely nonprofit model, a pay it forward model. And I thought, you know what? I've got to be able to do something in the local area. And so I've always worked full time and then done the nonprofit work on the side. And it follows the Parkinson's Voice Project model. We call it a donation based model. So I don't bill insurance. I don't charge for sessions. I just ask that if someone is able to and wants to, that they make a donation towards the foundation or the nonprofit. And that helps cover the cost of the therapy sessions. But it allows me, so a lot of people say, okay, I went to speech therapy, I got cut. Now what? Or, the big companies around here, I'm not getting a call back. And so I'm able to be more consistent and able to do what needs to be done for the client and kind of do the profession without all of those barriers of kind of that corporate healthcare model. And so typically people come in for, the individual speak out sessions, and then I invite them to one of the the speak out maintenance groups. And yeah, so the nonprofit we have a small office in St. Bernard. It's attached to a gym called Alpha Neuro Fitness, and he specializes in personal training with neuromuscular diseases, and then also do it virtual. So yeah, it's kind of been my baby for a few years, and
That's
trying to
awesome.
I
Just
can.
wonderful. Just bridging that gap. And I think you use that term, just finding a way to make it happen
Yes.
for these folks. So
Yeah.
tell us again the name of your business,
It is called Voices for Parkinson's.
and it's in Ohio. So
Hmm.
you have to live in Ohio, folks, because that
Yes.
is where she's licensed,
Yes.
and in person if close by, or virtual if
Hmm.
not.
Hmm.
And what is the best way for folks to find you on the internet?
So our web page.
I
Really
know.
funny.
See,
I kept
it's
thinking,
early.
email, not that word. So our webpage is www.voicesforparkinsons.org. And you can email me at info@voicesforparkinsons.org. And you can call me if you'd like. My number is not on the website, but if you want to call me directly, my number is 765. It's an Indiana area code.
Yeah, just
Four
to throw
two,
people
yeah,
off, right? Right.
yes, yes, 426-1776. Any of those ways. We're on Instagram at Voices for Parkinson's.
Neat.
Yeah, it's not the most I do post, but it's not an everyday thing. We are on there if you want to look
I
through our
feel you.
resources.
Social
Yeah.
media, yes.
Yeah.
So, everybody, we will put in the show notes all of Caitlin's contact information so you can learn more about her nonprofit. And if you're in the Ohio area and you know someone with Parkinson's that needs to have an evaluation, because the key is early.
Yep.
Now, I was doing some research. This is just going to be a little tangent. I wanted to see where where does speech really start showing up? Where do we start seeing changes with speech when you have a Parkinson's diagnosis? And it seems to come on like walk. First, there's that little tremor in the hand,
Mhm.
often, not always. But then you start seeing it in the gait. The gait is the fancy word for walking. How you walk, it's more like a shuffling gait, not picking up your
Right.
feet so much. Movements are a lot smaller. That it seems to take a couple of years once you start noticing symptoms for speech to start really changing. We
Yes.
want to get that early intervention, initial training, get you hooked into the community early
Right.
before the speech really becomes an issue.
Yes. And if you don't mind a side plug,
Right?
so early, absolutely. It's the other thing is deep brain stimulation. If you are thinking about getting that, I don't know. I think doctors are getting better at it, but it can impact your speech. And so the clients that I have had with DBS, the deep brain stimulation, have mentioned that their speech has changed overnight. Like when that procedure happens, and they present differently than a typical Parkinson's progression of the speech. So one thing, I was talking to Samantha with Parkinson's Voice Project, and she had mentioned, I said, "What? How do we help with this specifically and these characteristics?" And she says, "Well, it would be great if before they get this surgery or the implantation, they come to a speech therapist and kind of get ready and learn the techniques before something is changed." So, a side plug, if you're thinking about that, it can affect your speech. And I think sometimes it kind of gets brushed to the side, like, oh, it can affect your speech, but people don't understand how much that impact someone's quality of life. And then the other thing is the expressive aphasia. So, towards the end, as the cognition is changing, the word finding gets a lot more difficult. And so then you're battling, well, I'm trying to find what I'm trying to say. And then I have to think about how I'm saying it. That's kind of a double whammy. And so, like you said early, if we can teach you those strategies early and help you maintain those skills longer, that's just a side plug.
Very interesting with the DBS, the deep
Yeah.
brain stimulation, because many people that are candidates for that have a lot of dyskinesias. They
Yeah.
may have lots of tremors, lots of whole body movements, but then there might be some folks that have more subtle
Mhm.
physical manifestations of the Parkinson's, but they are also still considering deep brain stimulation.
Yes.
How much would you say the DBS impacts speech? Can you paint a picture in any I know you don't have data in front of you,
Yeah.
but
Mhm.
if their speech sounded one way, does it significantly decline after DBS and now they have to work even harder to get
Y
their voice back to a normal
Yes.
level?
So, anecdotally, just with the clientele that I have seen, it is a different speech pattern. So, it's more of the festination, the quick speech, the kind of mumbling and slurred, not necessarily the volume, but volume in terms of their breath coordination is really impaired. And it's really hard for them to make the changes. So They typically try to talk on one breath, and so it's really quick and it trails off because they're not breathing and coordinating that speech correctly. And then it gets a little bit mumbled and fast because they're trying to get it all out on one breath. So, of all the people who have come into me with DBS, that is a characteristic. Again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a researcher. This is just anecdotal, but I've seen a lot of early onset. Their physical is pretty good because they have the DBS, but their speech is significantly, I'd say, more impaired than the people who've had Parkinson's for 25, 30 years and don't have the implant of DBS. So it just presents very differently, and it's a lot harder for them to take those cues and to make the brain or the body changes. If that answers it.
It's another piece of the puzzle
It is.
when you're looking at intervention.
Right.
This is something everybody needs to consider.
Mhm.
And yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up. That's just one of those things that if you don't work with Parkinson's all the time, it's not obvious.
Right. And the doctors, I mean, they're so excited about the physical benefits, and they kind of say it may impact your speech, but and I've had a lot of wives or spouses, husbands, and clients tell me I don't think I understood the severity of how a communication impairment was going to impact me. Like, I don't want to talk anymore. I'm isolating. I've always been
Mm.
the jokester, and it's like it's heartbreaking. And so, I just how do we implement and help them understand that there are other side effects, and it's not just, I mean, it is the implantation, and then the patient and the people around them are like, I mean, it was overnight change. So it's not that slow progression in a typical Parkinson's where you have time to work on it and to start it. It's just kind of that speech area was affected by this surgery, and here we are now.
Yeah. Okay. Got to start early. Get
Yes.
hooked in with the community. And if you're in Ohio, I highly recommend reach out to Caitlin. She is a fountain of knowledge. You have so much experience. You have so much passion for this population. It
Thank
really
you.
comes through in everything that you do, and that you went to the extent of starting a nonprofit. That's amazing.
Oh, thank you.
On the work you've done and what you're doing for Parkinson's. And it's voicesforparkinsons.org. We will put all of our contact information in the show notes. And if at any time we can serve you, Caitlin, you let us know. Anything new projects you have coming up, we'd love to have you back.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Listen for Life podcast. We hope you feel empowered and supported. Head over to listenforlifepodcast.com to see the show notes with links and information from today's episode. Do you have a topic, a resource to share, or a guest recommendation? Inquiring minds want to know. Let us know in the comments section. Wishing you a fabulous week.